support.
The maestro, please.
Well, isn't this just the pop power duo? Today we'll be looking at Ed Sheeran and Justin Bieber's I Don't Care.
Ed Sheeran.
Boy, it has been quite some time since we did.
I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body.
Ed Sheeran has since continued to enjoy success, especially off of that same album with
Kissed her on the neck and then I took her by the hands. And baby, I just wanna dance with my pretty little Galway girl. You're my pretty.
in addition to
You heard it, darling, you look perfect tonight.
this one specifically because it had versions with Andrea Bocelli and Beyonce.
Justin Bieber.
Similarly, it's been a while, but not nearly as long since we talked about J. Biebs back with
Ain't looking at the truth, the money never lie, no. I'm the one, yeah. I'm the one early morning in the dawn. Know you wanna ride now.
Hasn't been up too much since then. He's been taking a break, and he also got married, so that's a thing. Regardless, he does still have a few collaborations that he did, most notably.
And if it ends, can we be friends?
And he has still had a number of features, and oddly enough, DJ Khaled got the I'm the One crew back together to do
You stick out of the crowd, baby, it's a no-brainer. It ain't that hard to choose. Him or me, be for real, baby, it's a no-brainer. You got your mind on loose. Go hard.
Background.
I Don't Care was released May 10th, 2019, and it charted the end of that month at number 2, where come the beginning of June, it is still at number 2. I Don't Care is off of Ed Sheeran's upcoming collaboration album, aptly named Number 6 Collaborations Project, which is set to be released July 12th. Obviously, it's a bunch of Ed Sheeran collab songs, I Don't Care being the first single. The second released single is
You cross her, you cross me, and nobody's coming close, yeah. And I think that you should know that.
Ed Sheeran and Justin Bieber work together quite frequently, whether it's one of Ed Sheeran's songs like this one, whether it's one of Justin Bieber's songs.
Cause if you like the way you look that much, oh baby, you should go and love yourself.
When one of them's a featured artist on a song.
And if you feel you're sinking, I will jump right over into cold, cold water for you.
Or whether they're just contributing some additional vocals, like in the form of a baboon.
Hi, I'm a baboon. I'm like a man, just less advanced, and my anus is huge.
Or a koala.
I'm a koala and I sleep all the time, so what, it's cute.
Regardless, joining the Sheeran-Bieber duet are Max Martin, Shellback, Pooh Bear, and Fred Gibson. Max Martin, the king of behind-the-scenes pop music. We first talked about him back when we were doing Since then, he's obviously continued to work with pop idols such as
So I'll take my time. Are you ready for it?
and including his continued work with Ariana Grande.
Break up with your girlfriend. Yeah, yeah, 'cause I'm bored. You can hit it in the morning. Yeah, yeah, like it's yours.
Carl Shellback Schuster is another one who's just as ingrained to the popular music culture, having numerous #1 hits such as
'Cause baby, now we got bad blood. You know it used to be mad love. So take a look what you've done. 'Cause baby, now we got.
in addition to
I didn't leave this, so keep dancing. I can't stop the feeling. So just dance, dance, dance.
both of which Max Martin worked on as well. In fact, Shellback and Max Martin work together quite frequently. Pooh Bear is another one we haven't talked about since DJ Khaled's I'm the One. Regardless, he has continued to work with any Justin Bieber feature.
When it comes to you, comes to you.
As well as a few things that were more unexpected.
Let me face my fears. I'm almost here.
Lastly, we have Fred Gibson, and while he's not as much as a pop powerhouse as the other three, he still does have a couple of hits on the charts, most notably
I can make it right.
as well as
Cry since the day we parted. Touch, but I got nobody, so I do it so.
Form.
I Don't Care is a pop song, just under 3 minutes 40 seconds, 4/4 time, F sharp major, and 102 beats per minute. After the intro, we get Ed Sheeran with the first verse.
I'm at a party I don't wanna be at, and I don't ever wear a suit and tie.
He then continues with the first pre-chorus,
Don't think I fit in at this party,
bringing us to our first chorus, which is still just Ed Sheeran by himself.
'cause I don't care when I'm with my baby, yeah.
Finally, we get Justin Bieber with his verse.
We at a party we don't wanna be at, trying to talk but we can't hear ourselves.
And by extension, his pre-chorus.
Don't think we fit in at this party.
We then have the second chorus, which is mostly just Ed Sheeran, but Justin Bieber has a number of ad-libs in it.
I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with my baby, yeah.
Then we have the bridge, which is first done by Ed Sheeran and then followed by Justin Bieber.
Baby, I don't care. I don't like nobody but you.
We then get the final chorus with again Ed Sheeran, and Justin Bieber is just going heavy on the ad-libs at this point.
You can take me anywhere. You're making me feel like I'm.
After which the song comes to an end.
Piano.
The piano is the first thing we hear, and it opens up with this very high C sharp and F sharp for 2 measures, then going to a D sharp and F sharp in the following 2. It then continues the high D sharp F sharp going down to C sharp and E before going back to the C sharp F sharp figure for the last 2 bars. The other part of the piano that comes in much later is much lower, but it is played in octaves, going F sharp, C sharp, D sharp, A sharp. The second half of it then goes B, C sharp, and then goes back to that F sharp.
Synth.
The synth, while a bit more rhythmically sporadic, is much more simplistic in terms of its notes, as it's really just doing an F sharp with that G sharp, A sharp figure at the end of each subphrase. It does follow the overlying harmony, though, going from that F sharp down to an E sharp, back up to an F sharp, before it hits that C sharp at the very end. What? We haven't done a bass bit in a while. The bass is similar rhythmically to the synth, although its subphrase ending is changed doing those octave leaps. Regardless, it opens up on an F sharp before going to a D sharp higher and then dropping down to the D sharp that's below that, but maintaining the same rhythms throughout. In the second phrase, it does get rid of that first subphrase ending, but it does do it again at the end. Regardless, it just goes B, C sharp, and then back down to F sharp.
Backup vocals.
Treating these as an instrument just because there aren't any words accompanied with them, regardless, the first set of backup vocals repeats what the piano was doing, just not in octaves.
Care when I'm with my baby, yeah. All the bad things disappear. You're making me feel that maybe I am somebody.
Obviously, that goes for the second phrase as well.
I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with my baby, yeah. 'Cause I don't.
The interesting thing about them, though, is that later in the song, they have a second layer added to them. The held notes are still the same, but they have these additional melodic figures added to them. The first one going C sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and the second one going F sharp, G sharp, A sharp.
As long as you just hold me near, you can take me anywhere. You're making me feel like I'm loved by somebody.
In the second phrase, the backup vocals get a bit more time to shine, doing more melodic figures, and more importantly, waiting to hit that F sharp in the second half.
I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with my baby, yeah.
Ed Sheeran's verse.
Ed Sheeran opens the song very melodically contained, just staying in the three notes of F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp. Besides that, it's a bit more rhythmically relentless, as it's just a bunch of 16th notes for the most part.
I'm at a party I don't wanna be at, and I don't ever wear a suit and tie at. Wondering if I can sneak out the back. Nobody's even looking me in my eyes.
He continues to maintain that small range, but it does have a few melismas and some alterations rhythmically speaking to keep it fresh, as well as the heavily layered hell yeah.
Can you take my hand, finish my drink, say shall we dance, hell yeah. You know I love you, did I ever tell you? You make it better like that.
Ed Sheeran's pre-chorus.
Once we get to the pre-chorus, the range moves from 3 notes to an entire F-sharp octave. That and the melismas are longer, and we've moved from focusing on 16th notes to 8th notes.
Don't think I fit in at this party. Everyone's got so much to say. Yeah.
The second half of the pre-chorus knocks down the range a little from that F-sharp to that D-sharp, but it still focuses mostly on 8th notes with the occasional quarter note.
I always feel like I'm nobody. Who wants to fit in anyway?
Justin Bieber's verse.
Justin Bieber opens his verse very similarly to Ed Sheeran's, maintaining that F-sharp, G-sharp, A-sharp range, minus the one D-sharp at the end of a melisma. Speaking of which, he's a lot heavier on his melismas.
We at a party we don't wanna be at. Trying to talk but we can't hear ourselves. Pictureless, I'd rather kiss them right back. But all these people all around.
When we get to the second part of his verse, though, it's a huge departure from what Ed Sheeran did. He goes up to that C sharp and works his way down to the F sharp. The second subphrase, though, is similar to what Ed Sheeran did, but again, Justin Bieber is still heavy on the melismas.
I'm crippled with anxiety, but I'm told it's where I'm supposed to be. You know what? It's kinda crazy cause I really don't mind. Can you make it better like that?
Justin Bieber's pre-chorus.
Justin Bieber again opens similarly to Ed Sheeran with more melismas, given he's now also starting to do more emphasis on his ad-libs.
Don't think we fit in at this party. Everyone's got so much to say. Oh yeah, yeah.
The same can be said for the second half of his pre-chorus, given at the end it's a bit melodically different.
When we walked in I said I'm sorry, but now I think that we should stay.
Chorus.
The chorus, at least Ed Sheeran's part, mostly focuses on going up to that C sharp and going down to the F sharp. The second subphrase, though, lowers that, more focusing on F sharp to A sharp to F sharp.
Cause I don't care when I'm with my baby, yeah. All the bad things disappear. You're making me feel that maybe I am somebody.
The next part of the chorus has these runs up to C sharp before continuing the C sharp down to F sharp contour, but then he jumps up an octave and then does again a C sharp down to F sharp.
I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with my baby, yeah.
The second half of the chorus starts out very similarly, given there are changed words, and because of that, some slight melodic alterations.
Cause I don't care as long as you just hold me near. You can take me anywhere. You're making me feel like I'm loved by somebody.
Regardless, it still does end the same way as the first half.
I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with my baby, yeah.
Once we get to the second chorus and Bieber has been introduced to the song, he stays out of it for the most part until we get here, in which he doubles Ed Sheeran's part in fourths and thirds and throws an ad-lib on the end.
I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with my baby, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
In the second half of the chorus, he still is doubling the same part that he did before and in the same way, although his ad-lib at the end is now different.
I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with my baby, yeah.
When we get to the final chorus, as I've mentioned earlier, Justin Bieber just goes extremely heavy on the ad-libs.
When I'm with my baby, yeah. Oh yeah. All the bad things disappear. You're making me feel like maybe I am somebody.
notice though as it goes on, he's moving higher and higher with his ad-libs.
I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with my baby, yeah. Ooh, yeah, yes, I don't,
And at this point, he's just in his falsetto range as high as possible.
yes, I don't care as long as you just hold me near. You can take me anywhere. You're making me feel like
And when we get to the end of the song in the third chorus, I just can't help but feel that he's trying to show off just a little.
I'm loved by somebody. I can deal with the bad nights when I'm with my baby, yeah.
Bridge.
The bridge opens with the rhythmic motif that's been hammered into us this far into the song. Regardless, it's very melodically contained, doing a similar F sharp to A sharp range, but it has that additional C sharp near the end.
I don't like nobody but you. It's like you're the only one here. I don't like nobody but you, baby. I don't care.
Justin Bieber's half of the bridge is almost melodically identical, given the rhythms are slightly altered to account for some changes in the words. Regardless, his half of the bridge ends much more abruptly than Ed Sheeran's.
I don't like nobody but you. I hate everyone here. I don't like nobody but you, baby, yeah.
This track's super catchy, probably because it's a pop song. I mean, it's a real poppy pop song. It's a real poppy pop song sung by two real poppy pop singers. And I get some flack sometimes from hipsters for just this sort of thing, because they want me to look at more musical songs, more worthy tracks. And I guess if you want my secret to dealing with all of the hipster hate I get sometimes, well, honestly, it's probably just because
Cause I don't care when I'm with my baby, yeah. All the bad things disappear. You're making me feel like maybe I am somebody. I can deal with the bad nights.
honestly, I'm surprised this is number 2, but I guess even the pop powerhouse of Ed Sheeran and Justin Bieber just can't top Old Town Road.
When I'm with my baby, yeah. Ooh, yeah, yes, I don't care as long as you just hold me near. You can take me anywhere. You're making me feel like I'm loved by somebody.